So when Amazon announced they'd take a crack at bringing the Fallout series to the screen, my immediate reaction was, they're never going to be able to capture the full essence of the games. Something like a comedically graphic slow-motion gunfight with the Brotherhood of Steel over Nat King Cole. That's just too bizarre of a tone for a show to capture, much less for an audience to appreciate.
A few moments later.
You did it. You crazy son of a Deathclaw, you did it. Now, since my last video on this topic, the landscape of expectation for video game adaptations has shifted. Fallout successfully visualized the meticulous attention to detail of an unconventional sci-fi game world. The Last of Us somehow turned zombie houseplants into prestige television. Hell, the same studio that struggled with the live-action Cowboy Bebop nailed the live-action One Piece. So look, I'm not expecting the Netflix Bioshock movie to be good, but like finding electric gel right before a fight with a Big Daddy, I think our chances are improved. Bioshock was released in 2007, and one of the reasons it's my favorite game of all time is in what's widely considered one of the greatest years for gaming in history. It still stands out with its energy, story, setting, and sophisticated moral considerations that outshine other classic games from that year whose only intelligence comes in the form of an in-game collectible. Dynamic lighting, exceptional voice acting, environmental storytelling. Any moment of play is so visually rich and unique, it sweeps you up in its world and it doesn't let you go. Compared to other classic games from that year whose contribution to immersion was successfully making me as bad at simulated sports as I am at real ones. So considering things have changed since my last 5 suggestions for how to make a great Bioshock movie, quick recap, keep it rated R, don't call it a video game adaptation, focus on one movie, keep the isolation, and use practical effects, I think it's time for a few more. So would you kindly stick around for 5 more things I hope they keep in mind for the Bioshock movie. Number 1, tell the story of the first game. Don't start a Bioshock movie at the chronological beginning, which, let's be honest, it's hard to even tell where that would be in a franchise where characters considering their own existence suddenly get nosebleeds. Now, technically, Bioshock 1 isn't the beginning of the story, but it is the best place to start. The first game is such a perfectly calibrated horror adventure. One fish out of water, or in this case, non-fish in water, slowly unraveling the mystery along with the audience. Now, the setting of pre-fall rapture seen in the Burial at Sea DLC is interesting, but only as a juxtaposition to the dilapidated utopia that we've already experienced. And that context is important, because really, without knowing how bad things do get for Sander Cohen, what he does in Burial at Sea isn't that far off from most interactions I've had with my fine arts professors in college. Starting with the first game gives time for the mysteries to breathe. What's with the melting partygoers? Why are these children glowing? Is murder part of the maintenance worker's job description, or are they off the clock? And unlike some other mystery franchises that shall remain gathering dust on my DVD shelf that ask questions first and then try to write the answers later, these mysteries have satisfying revelations waiting to be discovered. Mysteries that are wasted if you start in a purely linear timeline. Number 2. Avoid the multiverse. Granted, Bioshock Infinite came out years before we were all burnt out on multiversal stories. But honestly, my brain checked out in that game when the mission objective became enter new dimension to find weapons that might be at the place they weren't in this dimension, which also isn't the dimension you need the weapons for. I never thought I'd say this, but I'd love to get back to the simplicity of the first game's dense objectivist philosophy. The first movie should stay grounded. Magic science in a dilapidated haunted house doesn't need multiversal shenanigans to be interesting. In the famous screenwriting book Save the Cat, this is called double mumbo jumbo. If your vampire movie suddenly introduces aliens, A, you've done too much cocaine, and B, you're asking a general audience to suspend too much of their disbelief. Number 3, don't screw up the Big Daddies. Big Daddies are the key to all of this if we can get the Big Daddies working. Now, I have already discussed the importance of using practical effects to create the Big Daddies. It really is the only way to go. You can't expect us to get excited for computer-generated Big Daddies, considering that's technically what we see in the games. This is your chance to justify why a movie adaptation needed to be made. If there was ever an intellectual property that lended itself to pushing current-day boundaries of what's possible with practical effects, it would be a movie where monster rust buckets battle superhuman mutants in a dilapidated Art Deco metropolis. Just think of how depressing it would be to hire costume designers, makeup artists, and prosthetics teams on a movie that decided to do all this digitally. But even beyond that, the characterization, narratively, how these Big Daddies are used is equally important. The story of these behemoths and the people inside have so much potential, even beyond what we've seen in the games. So here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna narrate a potential scene that I think would encapsulate that level of detail that you could apply to the Big Daddies. Following the sound of a strange bellowing wheeze, Jack turns a corner and raises his Tommy gun in terror, but was not expecting the sight that greets him. There at the end of the hall, a Big Daddy lays mangled in a mass of twisted steel under a dirty cascade of water, his hulking frame contorted and broken, his suit cracked, his lapsed breathing monstrous and yet still painfully human. Jack exhales to steady his nerves. Until now, he's only ever seen these creatures in shadow or in a violent rush, but this one's different. Sounds different. He's dying. Jack's curiosity gets the best of him as, gun still drawn, he motions closer, finally peeking into the monster's cloudy porthole, and is immediately horrified. A grotesque, contorted eye, the size of a grapefruit, bloodshot, twitching, and to Jack's amazement, crying. The eye refuses to focus on Jack, but rather something a few feet away. And it's only now that Jack realizes the creature has been reaching for something. He follows its gaze to a stuffed bunny on the ground, waterlogged, ripped, and bloated. Jack scoops it up with the barrel of his Tommy gun and, still aiming at the creature, flicks the stuffed animal toward him, which limply lands in the palm of the daddy's massive hand. The somber moment is broken by the sound of clanging metal off in the distance, causing Jack to jerk in the direction of a dark corridor where the sound originated. Splicers will be here soon. He's exposed. Jack again turns to the Big Daddy and examines the eye, which has ceased all movement, staring off as if to some unseen horizon. Jack notices his breathing and movement have both stopped as well. The creature is now, somehow, at peace. Number 4. Only tease pre-war rapture. In the first game, your reward for exploration is more and more context about how things like when I leave clothes in the washing machine got so mildewy. Through the audio diaries, you become invested in the heartbreaking stories of the citizens of Rapture, which only adds to the impact when you find what's left of them. It's depressing and frightening that these are most of your relationships, and I think it's key to maintain that atmosphere. The closest you should get to meaningful dialogue between characters should be Jack huddled in a corner identifying with the crackling recording of Diane McClintock, expressing her own feelings of isolation and grief. Pick and choose very specific moments to tease us with pre-war rapture. The fanfare of a big brass band in the background of a New Year's Eve audio diary. A half-eaten birthday cake molding on the table in a house that was quickly abandoned. Looping videos barely visible on shattered display screens, advertising tonics or propaganda. As soon as you do a Lost-style full-scene flashback, you've given away way too much. This is not an ensemble piece. This is Jack's drippy horror adventure trying to avoid ringworm. Number 5, the ending. So spoilers for the end of Bioshock 1. At the end of the game, you assume the role of a Big Daddy and you fight Atlas. It is by far the weakest aspect of the game. Not the hacking, that's fine. In fact, I hope there is a 5-minute scene in the movie where Jack silently rotates tubes while everything freezes around him. Unlike the relative confusion in the game of exactly how much permanent damage you're undergoing to become a Big Daddy, I would suggest less is more here. Perhaps as a nod to the game, he uses the suit and the pheromones to disguise himself in a quick moment to get the drop on Atlas or get through a security door, but doesn't suggest he's spending the rest of his life in a diving bell. It's kinda hard to watch the little sisters get married if you can't eat any of the wedding cake. And maybe instead of fighting a yoked Dr. Manhattan with turrets in an open arena, Jack's actions at the end of the movie should be a culmination of the themes established throughout. The game does build relationships among Jack, Atlas, and Tenenbaum, but this is where the movie can go further. Just as a hypothetical, let's play with the idea of Jack's realization of his own creation, and how that makes him question his humanity or his capacity to make selfless choices, Atlas hammering over and over that he's a tool made from a petri dish, and Tenenbaum suggesting that being free of Atlas's control, he can decide what kind of man he actually wants to be. She can suggest that true humanity comes not from how we're raised, but the choices we make, which is based on her history and decisions. And all of this can be woven a little better than the game's shouty audio diaries from Atlas and the missed opportunity of expanding Tenenbaum's relationship with Jack. All this culminating in Jack refusing the selfish, easy choice, turning his back on his programming as an assassin, saving the little sisters, escaping Rapture, and actually finally getting to live a real life. Perhaps the ending of the movie is Jack in old age retracing the steps of his implanted memories. He finds the farm that he thought he grew up on. He finds the grave of who he thought his parents were. And maybe as he peruses a nearby general store, the owner innocently asks, "Would you kindly close the door? There's a draft." And the last shot is Jack walking out without closing the door, finally refusing to follow the orders of his trigger word. Or if you want to do the Inception ending, he does close the door and we're forced to wonder, did he do it out of kindness or is the programming still there? Now ultimately, this movie has a massive amount of potential to be so much more than just a CG-soaked sci-fi mess, and I am desperate to find out how much care they are willing to put into doing this right. Thanks for watching. I'm trying to grow my channel, so let me know what you think in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, and all that. I think maybe next time I'll do a deep dive into my personal casting choices. Oh no, look at this. He does other things too. There's more videos. What? You should check them out. Guild.